Roy, the tragedy of the male sex drive. Could you let us know why the male sex drive is or can be for most men so tragic?
Oh, well, that was the title of a chapter in a book I wrote about 20 years ago, applying social psychology to sex. And I think the point is it doesn't permit of lasting satisfaction. Whatever you have, you always want more. And so, in that sense, it's tragic, flaw, tragic in the traditional dramatic sense of something within the person that brings about his or her disappointment or downfall or failure. Um, that it isn't designed to reach a period of peace and permanent satisfaction. I did read, I think I talked in that book about there was a survey of men over 80 years old or something like that who had lost all their sex drive, and they said, well, what would you give to have it restored to the same level of desire you had when you were 20? And they said, I don't want any part of that. They were not eager for it. They were not. It was sort of a relief to be um, to not have that constant struggle and drive all the time. So yes, I have a hypothesis based on some other thinking that human males were selected for an exceptionally high sex drive. That if there were a way to compare across species, that the human male would have higher level of sexual desire than the other great apes, our closest biological relatives. I don't know how you would test that, but
And why? Why might they?
um, because essential feature of human evolution was bonding the male to the female for a long period of time. So, I mean, a chimpanzee might want to have sex, but it's just an afternoon delight, a few minutes of that, and that's the end of it. Whereas nature is trying to bond the human male and female together for at least a decade, so that the man will help protect and provide for the children that grow. And sex has always been the number one thing that attracts males to females. So, um, tying the male to the female, it would work. Another thing, I mean, this gets into some other ideas, but um, to be a provider really adds to the foraging burden, the amount of work that the ape has to do. Again, most apes, adult male apes, just feed themselves, but now to forage more to get some food for his children and even for the mother of his children, it's going to take more work. So probably in evolution and selling for that, lots of males said, "Hey, that's nuts. I'm not going to go all that extra work just because we have sex a couple times." But they took themselves out of the gene pool, and so what makes it worth it for the male would be the higher desire for sex. So that's a hypothesis that is far from an established fact, but it does seem to be that the male sex drive is quite high, and the tragic aspect that I noted 20 years ago that whatever you want, you always want more. You're never fully satisfied. You're just satisfied for a short period of time.
And is that so? So the counter to that might be, hey, there are a lot of men out there have met a woman, they've fallen in love, and so they have sex on tap. No,
Yes, well, the data show that the woman's sexual desire gradually diminishes as she settles into a committed relationship. And so to keep the man attached to her, it's not like the problem is solved and he gets sex whenever he wants for the rest of his life. That's what the young man who's not married thinks that marriage will be. But this was first came to my attention in a book by an Australian journalist who had recruited a whole bunch of couples to keep diaries of their sex lives, and she thought it would be a racy bestseller. Um, and I didn't know her or anything, but she sent me the book. She wanted to help me find an American publisher, which I was not able to do. But I read the book. It was very interesting. And what I noticed is that there were just a lot of I mean, there were some racy scenes and so on, and some imagination, but was a theme from a lot of them was the man asking for more sex or begging and so on, and the woman saying no, no, and get that thing away from me, and lines like that. And so the author, um, Bettina Arndt, said something seems to make women go off sex once they settle into a committed relationship. So I said, well, that's interesting. She's just a journalist with a non-random sample. So I contacted some of my colleagues who are experts in relationships research and said, is this known in the literature? Is this true that women's sexual? And they said it's not known in the literature, but we have big data sets. They had tracked newlyweds. They had two big studies tracking newlyweds for 5 years, the first 5 years of their marriage. And it took, 6 months to do all the data. It was very complicated. We have survey data where you go and re-interview these people over and over across every 6 months for 5 years. But when it came out, the data were pretty clear that the man's sexual desire, the husband's, on average, is about the same 5 years into a marriage as it was on the day he walked down the aisle, whereas the wife's, on average, has dropped significantly, and some dropped more than others, and marital satisfaction went down in step with the woman's desire. It made me wonder, and this is a wild hypothesis that goes well beyond the data, but we know that men get addicted more than women to drugs and things like that and pleasures. I wondered if that was part of the thing. It appears to be unique to humans. I don't really know. We haven't really studied addiction in a lot of species, but they do a great deal of research with rats because the rat brain is supposedly a reasonable analog to the human brain. And I talked to researchers there, and they mainly use females because they get addicted easier. So the propensity to addiction in the rat, at least, is stronger in the female, but in the human, stronger in the male. And it seems to be specifically the pleasure drugs. Everybody gets addicted to painkillers.
Right.
So, uh, so everybody wants the pain to stop, but to go from neutral to wow to bliss, that's the males pursue that much more. And it's hard to figure why that would have evolved, but I thought maybe that's part of what's attaching the man to the woman, because sex at first, of course, is bliss. And when it gets to be more erratic, as her sex drive subsides, um, it'd be like an addict keeping going back, hoping it will be the same as it was, and sometimes it is, which would be enough to sustain it. By the way, I don't think it's that the relationship as anything is bad for women or anything like that. My guess here, again, this is just a guess, is that nature turns up the female sex drive during the mating phase, and especially when she's in love, because that helps bond the couple together and form this lasting attachment so that they will stay together long enough to care for the children. Because the baby gorilla starts to feed itself at 5 months and is pretty much self-sufficient at 3 years, but the human 3-year-old is obviously not close to being there, so it needs much more care and protection over a longer period of time. I'm thinking nature tinkered with the sex drive and so on to forge this bond. I mean, another thing, most of the apes do rear entry sex, doggy style, um, and I guess that's more effective for actually creating a pregnancy, for planting the seed, so to speak. But why then does the human turn the female around? Again, it looks to me like for the purpose of forming the emotional bond. So you can look into each other's eyes when you're having your sexual bliss and kissing and all that other stuff. Uh,
So
so
in fact, part of that would be to say that one of the corollaries of this is that most of the times the sexual act, at least for human beings, isn't really about fertilization. It's more about bonding or maintaining bonds and relationship.
right, yeah.
Well, it, now there's a spicy additional angle to this, is there not, in terms of the tragedy of the male sex drive, which is that for some men at least, even for those that do continue to get it quite regularly, should we say, and frequently,
Hmm.
they may desire more variability, more variation
Right.
than a single partner is able to give them. And so potentially there's you want to put it this way, a tragedy there that they can't even be satisfied, even if they are satisfied, in the sense that they might always, to some degree, look over their shoulder at something different.
Yes, the desire for variety is much stronger in the male than in the female, and that's true, I guess, in other species quite a bit as well too. There's that so-called Coolidge effect, based on the story about our president a long time ago. Um, I don't know if you know the story.
No, sorry, I don't. Please do.
Oh, okay. So Coolidge was president in 1925 or something like that. He was famous for saying very little. I guess the story was they were touring a modern farm, and he and his wife were both there going separately. And so the wife came around to where the hen house was, and she looked at it and was all set up to get the eggs and everything. And she said, "Oh, you got one rooster and all these hens. Um, why is that? Don't you need an equal number?" And he said, "No, no, the one rooster can take care of them all." And she says, "Oh, the one rooster performs over and over again every night." And the farmer, kind of nervous, says yes. And she says, "Okay, well, point that out to Mr. Coolidge when he comes by." Oh, the farmer is very nervous about this, but the president comes and he says, "And your wife wanted me to point out that this rooster is able to perform over and over again, many times every night." And Coolidge looks at him and says, "Same hen every time?" And the farmer says, "No, no, no, it's a different hen every time." And he said, "Well, point that out to Mrs. Coolidge."
Exactly, spot on. Well, there we are. Um,
And so
um,
the effect is that the researchers find is that the male ape or whatever is able to perform again with a new partner more
yes,
often.
yes.
The refractory
Yeah, so
period is.
I think farmers know to move the stud animal, of whichever species it is, around to different females to keep it being interested. I think is sort of
Yeah.
yeah the Coolidge effect on the farm.
So
Yeah,
that
rings a
contributes,
bell
you're right,
now.
to the tragedy also of the male sex drive that even if you have a perfect partner and wonderful sex all the time, you still have desires for others, and that seems not to bother women as much. I mean, some of them do, but
Mhm, mhm.
it's a much stronger thing. And the evolutionary argument is very compelling, I find, that a man who has sex with lots of different women can have lots of babies, but the woman can only have one at a time, no matter how many men she has sex with.
Yes, although I agree, although there might be some advantages to a woman being to some degree interested in variability in their sex partner. For example, it keeps their main partner on his toes. There may also be some degree of sperm competition.
Yes, there certainly can be that, and um, so that when during the certain time of the month she becomes more attuned toward having some high quality man mate with her and wants to conceal it from her actual partner. She does need a partner. Anyway, um, the assumption is quality matters more than quantity to women. But for the man, powerful men really want both. There was a book by an evolutionary psychologist, Laura Betzig, who looked at the sex lives of powerful men, and they did have a wife or a queen or one primary high quality mate, but they would also have plenty of others on the side.
Elvis Presley.
Yes, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Quality plus quantity.
Keeping with the theme of sex and sex drives, you've made the argument that sex drive and interest can be explained, at least in the main, by sort of evolutionary processes uh, underpinning, reproductive success. So for men, they have the opportunity potentially to reproduce with a lot of women, so they want to go ahead and spread their seed. For women, they have very limited opportunities because they gestate a baby for 9 months-ish, and therefore, when they become fertilized, they want to make sure it's with a high quality male. So this, broadly speaking, produces these broad differences between men and women in their sexual desires, although there's going to be a lot of overlap between the sexes when it comes to individuals, as we've mentioned. Now, but given the importance of sex, obviously, for reproduction, why on earth then would there be homosexuality in human beings? Because this has it not got to be a reproductive dead end? And then one would imagine that would very quickly, very obviously, be eradicated from the
Yes,
population, assuming it's genetic based.
I've puzzled over that for years because often both nature and culture are against it. In
Mm.
our lifetime in the West, there's been more tolerance of homosexuality, which is, I think, a very nice positive trend. But still, nature has no use for it. Um, but the best solution I've seen was data by my um, one of my colleagues at Queensland, who looked at actually the British the big surveys data that you guys collect there, and so obviously gay men don't have children, uh, but it turns out their siblings have who are heterosexuals have above average success in having more sex partners. So the argument is this. Um, that a man who's totally masculine, a man's man, doesn't really get along very well with women. So you need some feminine traits to make yourself appealing. And the argument is if you have beyond a certain amount, I don't want to say too much, but for biological reproduction purposes, too much, then you don't reproduce. But it's sort of a hit the middle
Mm.
phenomenon. You want to be in the medium amount, and so if you overshoot and become homosexual, your siblings maybe a little bit less than you, but they're still at this very high level of appealing to the others. And um, I know we had a struggle. Publishing some of that stuff, and there's a lot of political interference with the scientific process. But to me, that's one of the few theories that could really offer an explanation. They've looked at others, like having a rich uncle who doesn't have any children himself might help. That didn't seem to work out. There were a couple other theories, but this would explain why. It's a large number of genes. There's not a single gay gene that they've been looking for,
No,
but
absolutely. Do you
large
know the name
number.
Michael Crawford? Maybe not. He used to
Uh,
be a big hit on the West End plays in the UK, Michael Crawford. He was on TV as well, but a long time ago. But he was heterosexual, but a little bit camp. And maybe he hit the sweet spot in terms of,
yep,
I don't know how many partners Michael Crawford had. Oh, actually, you know why he's coming to my mind as well? Because I saw some picture in the paper the other day. Donald Trump, President Trump, gave him some medal or something. This is Michael Crawford. He'd be 80 something now, Michael Crawford says. This has popped into my head. So there's some connection with the US there. But anyway, he might be that sweet spot of, masculine, but also having those feminine traits so that he can kind of relate well to women and empathize and
yeah,
so forth.
yeah,
And this makes him the sort of
yeah.
ideal
Yeah, gay men often have a
attractive.
lot of great female friends. They're not having
Yeah.
sex with them,
Yeah.
but they can have a good understanding
I
and
think
relate.
there are some alternative explanations can be physiological based.
Okay,
It might be the case that a gay son is more likely to be the second or third son to a mother. And so there may be, I don't remember any of the details, but there may be some effects within the mother or even the mother's womb that can affect the next child's ultimate sexual orientation. But I don't think any of these data are particularly strong, and I think the argument
yeah.
you put forward is as good
I have heard the
as
older
any.
brothers thing, and apparently that works for women with older brothers too.
Right,
Um,
right,
so
right. Okay.
maybe a physiological thing, or
Of course, there could be more than one going on, more than one driver going on at
could,
once.
could
I,
be.
okay, well, sticking with the theme of fertility, then there is a fertility crisis, at least in the West. There is a fertility, and actually it goes a long way beyond the West. One might argue, broadly speaking, outside of Africa and Israel, and probably a few other countries, most nations are experiencing a rapid drop or have experienced a rapid drop in fertility rates. For example, in the UK, where I'm based, it's something like 1.4. It might be a fraction lower than that. And relatively, that's not bad. Actually, I don't know what it is in the US, but I've got a feeling it might be even a little bit lower than that. Countries like Korea, I'm talking South Korea,
South Korea
and
is the worst. Yeah, I was just in China too, and Japan is having the same problem. China.
Japan, the Far East. So, what are your thoughts, Roy, on the explanation for today's fertility crisis?
That is a tough one. Um, Given that it's happened in so many different places, um, I mean, certainly one thing that goes with it is women having careers and postponing having the first child until they established their career. When women got married at 15 and had no education, and they had then 20, 25 years they could be having babies, and there was no problem to have half a dozen. Uh, but a lot of the young career women I know, they say, well, don't rush to get married. Establish your career first, get settled. You can always settle down in your 30s. And so in their 30s, they start to feel they want to get a husband and so on. And even if they get one, say when they're in their mid 30s, they're only going to have one or two children, not going to have very many more. And many of them, it's already too late, or it's difficult, and there's also the issue of the availability of men in their 30s. A lot of women say, "Oh, in my 20s, there were men all around chasing after me, and I thought this would go on forever." And so there was no rush to settle down. But then I got into my 30s, and Tina Arndt, who had the Sex Diaries book I mentioned, and she's blogged about this too. And I read some of her things that they're sort of shocked that many of the men now with the online things say that no women under 30
Oh,
or no women over 30.
mm, mm,
Uh, and so, she feels like she's the same person, but
mm.
suddenly it's much harder to find a man really to settle down with.
And the men are saying, and the women are saying, no, no men under 6 foot. So you've got this.
Right. Yes. Yes. And they want a man who's charming and successful and so on. And all these men were available to them in their 20s, whereas men in their 20s, if you're not in the top, the argument 20% of the men are having 80% of the sex
Easily.
in their 20s. And so it isn't until the 30s that the beta males start to be more attractive and get more success because maybe their career's taken off and they're a little older and more mature and more resources and status and all that. And so then they want to party, though. They're not eager to settle down. So the 33-year-old man doesn't want to date the 33-year-old woman because she's eager to close the deal and settle down and start a family. And he's saying, "Well, no, I missed out on my 20s. I want to have the party and have sex with a bunch of different people." So I mean, she was writing in Australia. I've heard similar things in the US, and I wouldn't be surprised if Europe is showing somewhat the same pattern. What's going on in China, I don't know. They are also very positive and progressive in terms of educating
Yes.
women and having women have careers and all that. But it also makes women think, why should I settle down? I'll wait till later.
I think, I mean, I agree with all of that. And look, there may be multiple factors, and I think it's very difficult to work this through. But I've said it before. I think people get their basic numeracy wrong. And what I mean by that is because it's the women that have this limit on them, and men have the advantage that effectively they don't. Um, I think women get to 30 something, 32, and they think, well, I'm still young, and they are young, and they think, and they're single, and they think, I've got time. So they keep going with the career and push for the promotion, as you said. They get to
Yeah,
35, and they think, right, I'm going to settle. They haven't got a man. By the time they jump on whatever the dating app is, and they have a few misfires over a couple of years, they just don't work out, right?
right,
And then they find that, not necessarily because they're older, but they're not getting pregnant that as easy as their sister did. Another
right.
year ticks by, so they get to 38 or 39, are relieved that they managed to have one child, and by the time they've kind of recovered from that and could possibly be thinking about having another one, they're into their 40s, and put simply, it's just too late. And so they've gone from 32 to 41 in my story there, in the blink of an eye, effectively, and,
Yeah,
and just haven't thought through, totally
yeah,
understandably, but they haven't thought through actually just the basics of how long these things take to happen. And I guess part of this is having careers. Of course, I'm not going to say people shouldn't have careers, but I think it can take the eye off the ball. I guess a generation or two ago, when so many fewer women were having careers, their attention turned to the idea of being mothers earlier on because that was a role they could have. That was an aspiration.
Yeah,
That was something
yeah,
they could move on to having. I wonder. So I don't think it's impossible, Roy, that we might return to that. I mean, or do you think
yeah.
that
Well, I think
society is too keen on saying to women, "Hey, do what men do and have careers and earn as much money as them"?
I think it, what looks the most promising for women would be some kind of system where you can get married in your early 20s and have some time to have children and be with them while they are small because they like that, and then really get into your career. We need a re-entry ramp into the career when you're getting into your 30s and the children are already in school and so on. I think that would suit a lot of women. Of course, a lot of women are pure career and they don't care, but some of them really do regret. There's a memoir I read, a nonfiction called Health and Safety, but it's a woman writing about her career and her relationships, and she was having a great time and going out and going to parties and taking drugs and hearing music and all these things. And but it's a very honest account of it. And she said, "Well, here I never thought I'd end up where I am in my 40s and single and childless. And the man didn't work out, and I didn't really find another. And I don't know what to do. And it's too late to have children. And
Yes.
yeah, a radical reimagining of organizations. I mean, organizations were created by men."
Mm.
And so they work on the male lifespan, which is you gradually work your way
Good
up
point. Good point. But
and
Roy, I'd be interested to know how many women, and I mean, this is walking on tricky territory here, but I'll be interested to know how many women really care about their career, at least once they've had children. My suspicion is, and I could be wrong about this, of course, my suspicion is really not very many women actually care that much about their careers. Some do.
yeah,
Once they've had children, they tend to pivot towards their focus, their priority being their child or children.
right. There are data showing that with the birth of the first child to a working couple, the woman pulls back from her career and the man doubles down because he's suddenly
Yeah,
feeling more responsible and I've got to provide and so on. I even felt
yeah.
this when I was in my mid 40s when my child was born, but suddenly, oh, I got to make sure to provide and so on. But the same, my wife was also a full professor at that time, and
Oh, right.
she said, "Oh, I really kind of like being with this baby," and she wanted to pull back for a bit. I read some survey data recently that a lot of women want to work part-time
Mm.
when they have a child, and some want to work at all. I think it was something in the 40% wanted to work part-time, and 20% wanted, 20 some percent wanted not to work at all, and maybe the remaining 30 some percent wanted to get back and work full-time, which some of them certainly do. But that's a majority not wanting a full-time, high-powered career while they're having their children. And some women are encouraged not to think about that in their 20s. But again, it looks to me like if we're going to solve the fertility crisis at the society-wide level, there has to be something that women would start having their babies in their 20s and then should somehow be able to re-enter the career track to the degree they want to in their 30s.
Here's a
Uh,
thought.
yeah,
Women are earning so much money now relative to men, often equally so.
yeah,
But they still want to marry up, as it's called. They
yes, that's
still tend
another
to
issue.
want to. Now,
Right,
but that's much harder now because sometimes they're even out earning the men. However, it's not just qualifications that drive career salaries, but also time on the job. So, in other words, people in their 20s tend to earn less than people in their 30s, or at least per
right.
hour, than people in their 40s, and so on. So it may be that women in their 20s are going to have to skip the men in their 30s and go for the men in their 40s so that they feel like they're marrying up in terms of salary, maybe not in terms of wrinkles, but in terms of salary. And by the way, those men in their first 40s may be more ready to say, right, I've met the right person, I'm going to settle down. Whereas those men in their 30s, and you've alluded to this, might sort of inadvertently at least string those women along for too many crucial years, right? So as women start to actually become a bit older. So maybe there needs to be some sort of cultural drive for 20-year-olds to hook up with 40-year-olds and everything will be solved.
Yeah, I mean that big an age gap creates other difficulties. It's hard really to connect on an intimacy level. Um, I I went to Princeton, one of the top American universities, and I guess there was a story some years after I left that a woman came back and advised the young women to marry while they were there. They said, "You'll never be surrounded with so many eligible, smart young men as you are right now." And the young women thought, "Well, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to get married for a long time, and I'm not looking for it." But it was sort of the wisdom of experience that once you leave this environment where there are hundreds of single people around you at all time, and also at an elite university, they're highly selected, or much more selected than you'll get out of an online dating app or something like that. Um, so I don't really know. It's a difficult problem. I'm trying to understand it and be sympathetic to both the men and the women.
Absolutely. Roy, we've got a small amount of time left on this call, I think for a couple of reasons. One, because you're going to be a chauffeur to your lovely wife soon, and also because Zoom calls are a little bit limited. I've got lots more questions I wanted to ask you, but maybe for the moment at least, we can fit in one more in literally 5 minutes. What do you reckon?
Okay, sure. We can do a follow-up too if you want this kind of stuff. It's fun, and I'm always interested in hearing other perspectives and your thoughts. So
Well, you're very
uh,
kind, Roy. I will almost certainly take you up on that offer. For now, I can see it on the clock. It says 5 minutes and 2 seconds. So, if we were talking, however fun and interesting these conversations are, and they are deeply fascinating, anybody doing this for too long will start to get tired. But why? Because, I'm not running, you're not swimming, we're not working hard, we're not burning huge amounts of calories. And yet, everyone knows that concept of getting tired mentally. Even if it's a fun task, after a while, we just get tired. Now, that's called ego depletion, right? So, after enough time of doing something, a mental task, as I say, even if it's an interesting task, we can no longer do that task as well. And also, we start to lose some degree of self control.
right.
Could you fill in any gaps I've got wrong there? And also, and again, we don't have long, but if you could briefly, do we know why on earth we get tired from doing something that doesn't superficially at least seem to be tiring?
All right. Well, certainly brain activity uses energy, uses glucose. That's how the brain scans work. They look at the consumption of energy and look at which parts of the brain are showing more activity. So the parts for self-control, which is a fairly advanced in terms of evolution, advanced part of the brain, that's in the front parts. The brain evolved from back to front. Um, so I stumbled on this reading the research on self-control and self-regulation, that it seemed to be that people ran out of energy, or it declined after a period of time, and there are now hundreds of laboratory experiments showing that effect, with lots of different methods and different procedures. Why it is? Um, well, it's it would be better perhaps to have unlimited self-control. Um, but it's probably an advanced power. It was difficult for evolution, for nature to create. And so it creates it in a limited fashion. In a sense, it's a similar argument to what we were saying earlier about the heightened female sex drive during the mating phase. Nature turns it up because it will help the man and woman form a lasting bond. And so, in the same way, human evolved self-control. I mean, the basis of my thinking is the human mind was created by nature for culture, that culture is our strategy for survival and reproduction. And it's working very well. Our population is going up while all the other mammals are declining. I mean, now we have the fertility crisis, but we're in no danger of going extinct. unlike, say, even the chimpanzees. Um, so the human traits are adaptations to enable us to take part in this advanced kind of social system with lots of rules and morals and laws and role obligations and things like that. So we need self-control to function in society. So nature gave us more of it, but it's expensive. It's not easy to do to override what you want. Um, it's free will is a related term which involves self-control and rational choice and other things. And they all seem to depend on this limited energy. I sometimes, when I give my talks on free will, I put up a slide saying free will is for following rules, which surprises people because they think, well, freedom means being able to do what you want with no rules. But my answer to that is that, well, any animal out in the woods can do that, to do act whatever it feels like with no rules. What you need advanced mental capability for is to operate in a system with lots of rules. So you obey the rules, but you can still take care of yourself and get what you want. That's an expensive biological adaptation. That's why it takes energy, and that's why when we're depleted, we fall back on impulsive actions or doing what we feel like, or self-control deteriorates and rational choice gets less rational.
Roy, that's a great response. It's a really interesting area because I know the physiology isn't well known, and of course it's not easy to delve into the brain while people are getting
Right.
worn out doing difficult tasks. I did read a paper recently just on the brain in general that was making the point the energy use of the brain doesn't seem to really change with tasks that we're doing. So somebody could be playing a game of chess and they're not using more energy than when they're not playing a game of chess, which leaves open that something's getting worn out. But is it quite analogous to getting tired if you're going for a run or something? And it appears no.